everyone, and welcome back to another fun-filled episode of Back in Their Day, the show that takes pop culture and the history we have behind it, analyzes it, and yanks things out of it like a claw machine on steroids. I'm the Fox.
I'm Kevin, and as you know, we've been going at that 70s show as much as we could, and as angsty as it is, we're going to go a little angstier and enjoy Eric's birthday.
If by angst you mean he's gonna be a butthurt little pain in the butt about something as simple as his mom throwing him a birthday party, then yeah, call it angst. But yeah, today we're all about episode 2, Eric's birthday.
Yeah, I have to say, he is one of my favorite characters for the show, but he starts off as kind of a whiny little nothing, and it's really good for character development, so that's great, but it is not so great for entertainment value. You know, this is one of those shows, too, that you can watch twice. Once when you're younger and once when you're older. And when you're younger, you're like, oh man, the parents are such a drag, I totally agree with the kids more, and you kind of catch base with them more. But when you get older, you're like, man, Red was right, dude. So right.
And I really feel for him on this one because, like, my birthday, anybody who knows me knows I hate birthdays. Just hate birthdays. Because everything that seems to want to go wrong goes wrong on the birthday.
I've never had those experiences, but watching that 70s show growing up, I definitely was one of those people who would look at the screen as a kid and go, Eric has the right idea. And then now I'm basically just Red, and I just look like a little more hair.
You know, a little bit of Red Foreman lives within us all. It's the American way. But yeah, no, I don't like birthdays either on that topic. Most of the time, if you don't remember mine is coming, you probably won't notice it because I won't even talk about it. I'll just let that day slide on like any other day because it's just a day. My son's birthday, super important every single time. Mine, meh, we'll get there if we get there.
And once you become a parent, you want to do something good for your kids that you didn't have growing up. Like if you had bad birthdays, you want to make sure you go over the top and their birthday is just going to be the most spectacular ever, which is what you see Kitty doing, trying to hide it and wanting to do the best for her son.
Yeah.
And again, I understand, but from the as I'm grown up now, I also understand it from the teenage perspective.
I gotta imagine though, with Eric being as mad as he was about Kitty going all out for his 17th birthday, I can only imagine the stress she put him through for the rest of them. I mean, she's talking about, what, 7 bags, go pick up 7 bags of M&Ms and a couple cans of frosting at the store. Just don't look in there. No, I'll get you this, I'll get this, I'll get this. Why? Because there's cake and there's chips. And the whole time he's just deconstructing exactly how his party is going to go before it even starts because he's just watching her build it in front of him the whole time, whining and complaining. Red at the same time is going, don't, he doesn't want it. And of course, Mom has no time for that nonsense.
You know, it's kind of like watching a terrorist build his bomb in front of you and you know what's going to happen and there's nothing you can do. And 17 isn't even that big of a birthday, dude. 18's way bigger. 16's supposedly bigger. And you know, it's just kind of funny to me how all out she goes, but she really loves him. You know, that's the kind of mom you want, is somebody who really goes out of the way for you. It's the whole model TV mom, and it's good. It's great.
And what was great was seeing them trying to tear Kitty away from them, letting them have their own time. Red had to physically pull Kitty out of the door in order to get them.
Kitty.
Just let the kids have their good time. And honestly, when you get that age, that's exactly what you want. Just leave me alone. Let me have my good time. I'm with my friends. It's gonna go well.
That seems like it's kind of a running trope though. As Eric grows up, Red has to consistently pull Kitty away to let him grow up because she wants to swoop him up and coddle him from day one of the show onward.
By the time that he actually becomes an adult, she's so bent on sheltering him from the adult world that she's just trying to do everything she can to keep him a kid forever. And holy crud, is this like a perfect episode for starting to show that. And by the time he turns 18 and you see how it turns around between now and then, it's crazy to see how different the situation is come his 18th birthday, which we'll probably talk about in time.
Oh yeah, character growth is important. The development of each and every single one of those little burned out losers is great. And it's something that we're going to touch on frequently, so get ready for that. Without further ado...
Alright, so the episode, it opens, they're all hanging out in the basement, as most of them do, watching TV. I think the last episode, it was the Brady Bunch. This time, it is a show called Petticoat Junction. Created by Paul and Ruth Henning, Petticoat Junction is actually a second spin-off in a series of 3 of those rural hometown sitcoms from back in the day. It started with the Beverly Hillbillies. Then eventually we got Petticoat Junction, and from that came another series called Green Acres. They were all very rurally based, small town. I think Petticoat Junction centered around a small hotel in Hickland, USA. And a lot of the adventures centered around this train called the Hooterville Cannonball, and it was whether it was shutting it down, using it as an impetus to go to different places during an episode, or using it as just the storyline in general. Something as simple as basing a sitcom off of a small town taxi train is something you just do not see much anymore.
No, Hooterville's where I gotta go for my birthday, since we're gonna start planning it and it's a thing now, right? But, you know, I've noticed that a lot of the time back in the day, they did have a lot easier time just representing different cultures to one another. And I think that's because it wasn't as interconnected as things are now. Like, you go on Facebook, you can find out what people in Australia are doing, what people in England are doing, what people in Nigeria are doing sometimes, even if you have friends like that, if you're that good at social media. But that's sort of a thing that did not exist in the 70s, so it was this amazing sort of artwork to just show us happening a few states over, because there was no way for them to find out. It's really interesting to see the tropes that aspire from things like that.
I was kind of curious with some of the commentary made during the show. It's just, I really want to be the Hooterville dog.
Kevin, you are the Hooterville dog. I'm gonna get you a costume, and we're gonna run you around town, and you will be the Hooterville dog.
I think I'm okay with that.
It doesn't matter if you're okay with it.
I agree with him. It doesn't get much better than bathing with 3 buxom ladies in a water tower.
So wait, we're having a pair of Hooterville Hounds now? We're going further than the trope itself?
Baskerville, Hooterville, pick a city, I will take it. We will turn into a dog pack and we will go.
Yeah, no comment there.
Yeah, we're not bad at all.
No.
Dog pound. Yeah, the show was conventional series back then. I mean, there was always a character who was trying to scheme. There was always 3 people who were trying to kind of keep everything in order, and then you had just random people always trying to mess it all up for them. So, I mean, all in all.
You know, it sounds a lot like Ed, and Eddy. I think that show really would have boomed in the 70s.
Ed, and Eddy's like the little kid version, I guess. Yeah, I mean, most shows are like that, though. You have the 3 guys who are just there. You have the world around them. And then you have those few people that are just trying to mess it all up for everybody. Hence the antagonists.
And it didn't seem after they got the parents out of there, it seemed like the troubles seemed to keep going, because Donna was all of a sudden worried about what she needs to get him for Eric for his birthday, because she's just so nervous over this new budding relationship that may or may not be happening.
Oh yeah, you know how they're all in the very beginning throes of their relationship together. You know they're gonna end up together, but they don't know it yet. I think Eric has a hint.
If all Eric has is a hint, then he didn't pay attention to the first episode when she told him that he could have had her when he was 4.
Which, just quick side note, is terribly disturbing, but we're just gonna move on from that real quick. Turn in the camera, guys.
It's not that disturbing if they're both 4. Don't try to make it weird, Joe.
Weird to begin with.
Maybe, but that's besides the point. It's the 70s. It was a very iffy time. People had a lot of gray areas. Hell, people have too many gray areas now. So this show also marked the first appearance of Lori, Eric's older sister. You will go on to see her many more times, and in not dissimilar states as you saw her when you were first introduced, with her sweater down over her underwear while she's doing laundry. Lori and Kelso will prove to be a very interesting pairing in this series going forward, and you are getting a very small taste of what that's going to be like in the beginning right now.
Lori and anyone is a very weird coupling because she's just a very weird, eccentric individual, and that's putting it mildly. You know, the whole oversized shirt thing is pretty big today still even, so it's no surprise that we see it in the 70s, especially with a character like Lori.
And then you get Kelso involved, and he just starts writing his own narrative. He looks at her, and she basically tells him he doesn't have a chance. But what he hears in his head is 100% the other direction.
You know, I like to do things with that myself, but it's not so much to really pump myself up for something that'll never happen. Just more to mutilate conversation and make it silly in my head because it's funner that way. I really like when people cut up things and make them weird. But yeah, you add Kelso into any situation and it immediately becomes weird and horndoggish.
I think the whole self-editing situation really gave you an idea of like a secret cleverness to Kelso, because he not only took conversation and things she said to him, Lori said to him, but he took the conversation of pretty much everything she was saying to anybody and responding to it, and she just supercut it, and he just supercut it into like the best come on ever.
You know, and it's kind of weird because there is an underlying intelligence ability with Kelso that's not really touched on as much, but he does kind of see some between the lines things, because at the end of the day, we all know how Kelso and Lori did turn out, so maybe he was more right than we're willing to admit at first.
The funny thing about Kelso is the character, when Ashton Kutcher actually got the role, he didn't get the role for playing it dumb. He got the role for playing it naive. A lot of the people who were doing their auditions at the time were coming in and they were playing it stupid, like just a complete fool. But he came at it as if it was more of a childlike innocence, and that's actually what got him the role. And that's something you see more. It's not necessarily the exploration of the mind of a dumb person so much as it is someone who understands but doesn't quite get it.
Which, if you think about it, makes perfect sense because, I mean, Kelso's parents, you see his dad once in the series, if I'm not mistaken, and you don't see his mom at all, so he just doesn't have a lot of parental guidance, you know? And that's a big thing back then. That's the latchkey generation, you know, where they'd lock up and they'd go to work all day because the roaring 20s and 50s were all over, so everybody had to start shoving themselves back into the economy. And as you see, a lot of businesses not only rise, but fall very quickly, leaving the kids to figure it out on their own, and some of them are not as quick at catching on. Kelso's a perfect example of that.
And something else you notice about Kelso is, like, while he does come off a little idiotic and a little, as you were saying, more than a little naive, he definitely lives in the moment. You can't accuse him of not living in the moment.
And they say that's the best way to live.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Very true. In everything they do, he is always right there and he is always focused on it, because I don't think if he wasn't focused on the event at hand, he wouldn't know what was happening.
And to be fair, you know, he does question things a lot. A lot of the things that are left in ambiguity, Kelso's like, what did you mean by that? What does this mean? Oh my God!
Some of my favorite moments are like when they're trying to mess with each other and Kelso's on the sidelines wondering what's going on. Like the Halloween episodes. And he's like, it's just like, get out. And Kelso's just like, did you hear that? No.
So good.
Does anybody else hear that? No. All right. Some of the things that they mentioned, Eric, for his birthday, his parents ask him what he wants. This starts a very long journey to his acquisition of a cassette player. But before he states that he wants a cassette player, he absolutely reiterates multiple times to his mother and father that he does not want an 8-track player. An 8-track player, also known as Stereo 8, was actually a format created in the mid-60s and was popularized all the way through the 80s. It was actually only popular in a handful of countries, though. Maybe like 12 countries total. The rest of the world didn't really catch on. It was still wax for a lot of us, or for a lot of them.
Huh.
Basically, an 8-track tape, as opposed to a record, you had to flip it. Or a record anyway. But an 8-track tape, you could just throw it in your player and it would just play through the whole thing. It was just a super convenient way to just make it so you didn't have to be distracted by your radio in your car.
You mean it played all 8 tracks?
Believe it or not. It was actually also created by Bill Lear, the guy who created the Learjet, along with a bunch of automotive companies back in that day. Like most audio technologies that are going to be used in cars and moving vehicles, of course, they all had to have a hand in it or else they probably weren't going to let it happen.
I'm in that high fidelity first class traveling set and I think I need a Learjet.
Okay.
From there, like I said, it lasted to the 80s, and that's when the cassette tape became a thing. Actually, the cassette was around long before the 8-track, but it was kind of considered its lesser-known brother, mostly because it was created for audio, like home audio recording, like talking, like the beginnings of podcasting. The fidelity in it, the technology, it didn't allow for something as high quality as full sound, like well-rounded sound, to be involved in it.
So, you're saying this is kind of where pirate radio got its start even, was with cassettes and just, was it like grocery lists before the people who were more forgetful?
Well, so I'm sure, honestly, I doubt it was something like grocery lists. Have you ever seen a tape player from that end? Back in that day, like cassettes were a thing, but it was reel to reel still for a good chunk of people, even if they were smaller. But these compact cassettes, they're just all in one thing, and you just had to have the right machine for it. But tape players back then, in the beginning of that production, weren't capable of fully like fleshing out the sound that you wanted from your musical tapes. So that's when things like boomboxes and Walkman were created. They had to create something that would give the tape full fidelity, if that makes sense.
Didn't the 8-track, wasn't it only capable of holding like a short amount of music on there as well?
Yeah.
Because I heard there's only 1 or 2, like maybe a handful of tracks on there as opposed to what cassettes were doing.
Yeah. The thing about cassettes, though, is that it kind of went backwards in a way that you had to go back to flipping them. But yeah, you're right. The cassettes had 5-6 songs on a side, and you just had to take it out, go from the A side to the B side, which I'm sure for nostalgic music fans, that was awesome when it came to wax and you're used to that A side, B side system.
I've been playing music for a long time and playing guitar and such. When I was younger, I actually had this small stereo setup that I would use to record my music, and it used cassettes. And there's cassette after cassette of me, Little Joe, playing guitar and singing along with it. It's probably somewhere at my mom's house because she's very nostalgic for that reason. But that is an interesting note that it did have more room, but there was, as you said, less fidelity in it. My recordings were a little more scratchy and just raw than you would get out of certain things, like we discussed with the clarity of Rubber Ducky last time.
Oh yeah, I remember recording when I was younger, things off the radio with my cassette tapes, and you got the scratchy sound, but as it was coming off the radio, it just kind of blended in with that, so you really didn't even notice.
Yeah, once again, it's another example of pirate radio, only it's not the same as the previous idea. We're literally pirating the radio now. Yarr!
Cassettes took quite a bit of time to improve on. Coming out in the 60s, it wasn't until right before the 80s that they finally got the technology good enough to improve them to make full musical recording viable. Cassettes were also fairly plotted for their mobility. People could take them with them everywhere they want, and once cassette players in cars came out, they just took the medium to a whole new level.
Cars today are still sold with cassette players. It's maybe not as common as CD players, but it is, as we've noted a couple times, much more dependable than CDs. We mentioned it, I believe, last episode, how CDs are kind of easily messed up and hard to take care of, like I believe you said that the records were.
Oh yeah, the vinyl records were just, you had to be very careful. They had their own sleeves inside the actual box cases. And it was they were like this big, and you had to be so careful every time.
So if you buy a record and it doesn't have its protective, rubber, then it's not a good one. Send that thing back or you'll get a musical STD.
Musical STD. What?
Would that be Yoko Ono?
Yes, it would. Yes, it would.
Hey, I thought we all agreed not to say that name in this house.
Sorry, Yoko.
Sometimes people need to be reminded of plagues.
Oh, yeah.
So as Eric's talking to his parents, his dad mentions, as far as the cassette player goes, he's going to get him a genuine GM or a genuine Delco or a genuine GM part for his genuine GM car. And Eric, of course, has only to say, oh, it doesn't matter the brand as long as it works. And of course, since red's red and things went with the things they were supposed to go with back then, Red had something to say about it. Delco was a company actually that was an electronics division of General Motors and was created specifically for their components. So whether it had been electronics or whether it had been wiring or lights, it's just anything that was like a device inside the vehicle that wasn't directly attached to the car itself was created by Delco.
You know, that kind of does show a trope of today to then as well. Everybody's so ready to throw whatever custom part fits. There aren't as many people who are brand loyal to things there. They have to get every part is every corresponding part, unless you get into the real nerds, which I don't know much about them, right? But still, it's interesting to me how much that is something that is of the bygone age, where people used to think that this belongs to this, so it can only go to this.
And we were just at that point in time getting off the post-Vietnam era, so everybody was very gung-ho about the parts that they get for anything they use having to be genuine American-made parts.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Loyalty was a huge thing in that era.
It always is in wartime. I mean,
War never changes.
I mean, why do you think they complain about having a Honda? I mean, World War II he's in the middle of the Korean War, World War II. God, it's Japanese car deal. I don't care about cars that much, as you can see. Well,
He doesn't even have one.
that's how little I care. I'd rather walk. It's cheaper, too.
It is. I gotta side with that guy.
Man, it always feels like everyone's against me.
Well, Joe, quit trying to push your convention on us then, huh? Whole world doesn't need cars. Well, maybe you could trunk them if they want to go anywhere, but that's not the point. Okay, as it goes on, like we mentioned earlier, Donna's kind of having a crisis about what to get Eric due to an oncoming budding relationship. They still are kind of tiptoeing around each other despite the fact that they know full well how they feel about each other. So, as a teenager, you tend to overthink everything. So, of course, Donna's overthinking exactly what to get Eric. So she turns, of all people, to Jackie, who is older in love years.
I don't think Jackie's a good table for advice for any situation. But no, I definitely remember being younger and being like, I don't know what to get. Does this mean too much? Is it not enough of a gift? Should I give them jewelry? Should I go out and steal them something? You know, that's what teenagers do, right?
And the great thing about hindsight is once you get older, if you realize you just listen to someone, you figure out what they like, you know what to get them. But in this case, as you're a teenager and everything is just firing off all at the same time, you freak out.
Well, also you have those people who are like Kitty who will tell you they're not going to do something and they're going to do something, which kind of perpetuates the struggle of, I don't want an A-track, and he gets an A.
He constantly tells his mom that he wants a cassette player once and then consistently repeats that he doesn't want an 8-track. And then, of course, Kitty's like, I guess that's what we'll get you then.
Well, yeah, because her whole ordeal is, oh, I'm not throwing you a party. It's denial to the fullest, man. It is the worst.
Oh, hi.
Give a little stretch. So eventually Donna decides, with Jackie's help, to get a sand candle. A sand candle, which wasn't what I thought it was. I literally thought it was just like sand mixed in with the wax and it was just the candle. Apparently a sand candle is just wax poured into a sand shell.
Huh.
Which, yeah, it's just the body. It's as opposed to putting it in a glass jar, just create like some weird like sand formation, harden it, and then pour your wax in there, and apparently that's a sand candle.
Wait. I've seen candles that look like they were literally made out of sand, though. Is that just because we've gotten so good at it that it's not really noticeable? Because clearly it's some agent that melts enough, and sand melts at a higher temperature, as we know, and then creates glass. So it's not quite the same, but...
Honestly, I'm kind of with you, because you look at the candle in the show that they give you, and it doesn't even look like it really has a container. It's just like a big bowl with a base on it, and it all looks like it's just wax and sand mixed together. Like it will burn down into a bowl eventually, but I couldn't look at it and see that there was like a shell that was independent from the candle itself. The whole thing was like a weird darkish blue, like green.
Yeah, I only have so much experience with 70s technology. That was how many years ago? I think I counted them last time. I don't feel like counting again. You know how hard it is to count these days?
It only gets harder as time goes on. I mean, as time passes, the number gets bigger. So,
as time passes, a lot of things get bigger, Cord.
Not the things you want.
Yeah. See, you mentioned time passes and then turn the camera to the oldest guy here. Thanks.
Oh, that wasn't intentional at all, Kevin. Don't worry.
Okay, yeah, I remember you actually going to when you were mentioning the curlers and how the guy burned all the hair off of his head, and then you turned to Cord.
Yeah.
Like all the hair was melted off of his head. Over Cord.
Show the bald man.
Thanks. Now look who's getting pointed out, Kevin.
I think at some point and another we're all going to get pointed out for the things that we do inappropriately or have inappropriately. You know, it's kind of the trope.
Yeah.
Yeah, poking fun is a predominant way we bond. So, we move on to the birthday party. As you can see, there's not a whole bunch of stuff in this episode compared to the last one. It being the pilot, they really had to do a lot of world building. So by the second, they're just kind of giving you glimpses into life for these guys. So the party comes in, and you just kind of get a little bit of what Eric's getting. And one of the things that he opens up is a hot shave dispenser. And I thought there was going to be more to this, honest to God. Not. It's literally a machine that you put shaving cream in, and it warms it and dispenses it for you.
Oh boy, that's simple.
Now it was like, you know those machines that you see nowadays where people can put in their toothpaste? And like they just drop the tube in and they just like attach something and it'll like squirt out their toothpaste? Mm-hmm. It's similar to that, but it's for shaving cream.
So it's the Keurig of shaving cream.
Yeah, except for, yeah, you're getting it hot too, so I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, it was just this little container, because I remember my dad had one, and he kept it around way longer than he actually needed it. But but yeah, all you did was, it was this little thing, you set the can in, and that was it. It heated it up, and you just pushed the button that was normally on the can in the first place. It did almost nothing. Yeah, I mean, you could have probably gotten away with turning your stove on low and just setting the can on top of it. That's all it did. I don't recommend that. Don't do that.
Yeah, no, I guess explosive warning, Kevin. You know, we're all hot and ready these days, just like Little Caesar.
Who wants a homemade pipe bomb? But it really goes to show how nitpicky people were back then. I mean, nowadays, you just grab a can of shaving cream, spray it on your hand, go. People needed it warm? Call it picky. Way too picky in the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, over-exaggeration is kind of a running trope in this, though. I mean, from Kelso to Kitty, we got all sorts of exaggerations to the sun and back, which, you know, is kind of impossible to actually even get to, but we'll touch on that later, if we can reach it. And there's not a lot of names between Kelso and Kitty, is there? You know, everybody else has a different letter. But, you know, I love that she went in her mind and imagined everybody as gangsters, and the whole, not the littlest hobo.
Yeah, that was great. She didn't go to them being bad kids as bad kids would have been at that time. It was bad kids how bad the kids would have been in her time. So you're thinking just like you were saying, the gangster era, they're all wearing zoot suits and just flapper dresses and.
Dude, it was so rough. I loved seeing them dressed up as 50s mobsters, though. That was my favorite.
The dubbing is just amazing too. I mean, ooh, that's for the school.
So does your brain automatically go to your childhood when you think about bad things happening now? Parents at home, does that happen to you? I know some of the older folk are watching this. I mean, you should be, because we're great. But yeah, I always think it's funny because when I think of a now or a current situation that I'm trying to imagine, I don't go too far from today. Maybe that's just because the 90s was my home and it's not too different from today, but that is an interesting idea, that going back in time to represent what you think will happen.
Well, you're only going on what you have for historical context, and if in the 70s they're over exaggerating and imagining things in the worst case scenario, I don't see a much worse case than some kind of seedy bar full of like mobster Frank Sinatra types.
Right, where they're all still allowed to smoke in the bar. That was the thing they're not allowed to do anymore.
Yeah, going back to my childhood, there's a reason lots of people try and forget the 80s, because it was just all neon and well, not Technicolor, I guess that was an earlier era, but just it was too bright and not forward enough in there, well, in anything. It was an era everybody wants to forget, and you notice not many people reference it anymore.
You know, that's something interesting too. You get the 70s was kind of like the whole fall harvest color. It was kind of on the declining age, it almost felt, where things were getting tough again. And the gas crisis, like we mentioned, was a big thing. But you know, the 80s were like, it's brand new, baby! We got everything and we're good to go. It almost seems like every decade they have, of course, their own theme, but it was trying to recover from that 70s slum that they were in. That's kind of interesting to me.
America in the 80s was all about reinvention. Like you said, the harvest colors, declining economy, just between the gas crisis and just the general mindset of people. When the 80s came, it was a whole new refresher course on how to be American again. Credit became a thing. Brighter colors became a thing. Music became more mainstream as far as mass popular appreciation of it. I mean, you had people like Aerosmith and stuff in the 70s and things like that were doing huge things with music, but come the 80s you had new wave and you had electronic music and you have things like we mentioned in the last episode. Credit cards were not a freaking thing back then. When that was invented, it created a whole new world of excess for our country that brought it into like this new vain mindset, and it has kept going.
Dude, I love synthesizers though. Bam, 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 bam. I walk along the avenue.
Yeah, but with the 80s, you'll notice that 80s show did not last too long. So
no, I guess that was a pretty short chapter in our history, wasn't it?
Very.
Well, in that 80s show, you can't blame them. They took all the things no one liked in the 80s and tried to turn it into a TV show. If they'd have thrown some Depeche Mode in there, people probably would have appreciated it a little more.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, not liking things in the 80s, I mean, I think that was the whole trope of the 80s, is there wasn't really anything permanent.
Everything was developing, as the show is, and right there we're going to go ahead and cut it. I've had a great time. I hope you did too. I feel like we're really finding our footing in the show, guys. It seemed like it was pretty smooth. I really enjoyed it. So I hope you join us next time. We'll be back at least next week, if not sooner, because this is fun. I don't know about you guys. I'm the Fox.
I'm Kevin.
My name's Cordo.
Keep it real, yo.